Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 2chan. This is Japan's version of 4chan that was founded in 2001. It's an anonymous message board in Japan, which was the origin for many early internet memes and creepypastas like Red Room and Kisaragi Station. So I figured it's a good place to translate some scary stories from. The stories translated today are true personal accounts of ghost encounters. So I hope you enjoy. But before you get comfortable, be sure to subscribe to the channel, as the goal is 20 million subscribers. And if you enjoy this type of content, be sure to hit the bell to be notified when I post another video. And with that said, let's jump into some unnerving posts translated from 2chan. This happened when I was in middle school. After club activities one evening, I was walking home with a close friend. For convenience, I'll call myself A and my friend B. In our hometown, there's a long, steep slope. At the bottom, it splits into two roads. We had a little ritual of chatting there for a while before heading our separate directions. At that spot, flowers were always placed by the roadside. I'd heard there'd been an accident there once. I don't remember how long we'd been talking that day, but the sun had already set and dusk was falling. The orange glow was fading into something darker, and just as I was about to say, "See you tomorrow," I noticed B had been frozen. Her eyes were fixed on something behind me. "Huh? What is it?" I asked, spinning around, but there was nothing. "Hey, what's wrong?" I pressed. B blinked hard, then said almost desperately, "Let's go to the shrine now and pray." It was not a request. The sky was already growing dark, and the last thing I wanted to do was detour to the shrine. "Huh? Why now? I don't want to go." "Come on, please, let's just go," she insisted, grabbing my arm. Dragged along, I went with her to the shrine. The shrine was a big one, familiar to us from local festivals. We clapped our hands in prayer, and B insisted I buy an omamori charm. Reluctantly, I did. It was actually the first charm I ever owned. As we left, B suddenly said, "From now on, promise me we'll never take that slope again. Please, promise me." "What? Why?" I asked. Her face was pale. "When we were talking just now, behind you, suddenly a boy appeared." She began shaking violently, her teeth chattering. I walked her home, still baffled, and explained to her mother that something had upset her badly. I couldn't make any sense of it. That evening, I asked my own mother about the flowers on the slope. "Are they for someone who died?" But she didn't know. "Ask your father," she said. "He's lived here longer." My father was hardly ever home, though, so I couldn't ask him right away. From B, all I learned was that she had seen the ghost of a boy. She wouldn't say more. She was badly shaken and begged me to never go near the slope again, and to always keep my charm with me. I agreed, although honestly I didn't take her seriously. Weeks passed and I kept to our promise and avoided the slope. But it meant going the long way around, which was inconvenient. One evening I realized I'd left something important at school. If I hurried, I could make it back before sunset. Against my better judgment, I decided to take the slope. The path was deserted, and the silence made me uneasy. But I pushed on. Halfway up, I glanced back. At the bottom of the slope, where the flowers were placed, a boy stood. He was just standing there, staring down at the flowers at his feet. Then, without warning, he began to move. At first it looked like he was walking backwards, straight towards me. Panicked, I turned and ran uphill. The slope was steep. My lungs burned, my legs ached. I looked back again. The boy was frozen mid-step, as if someone had hit pause on a video. His posture was identical to the last moment I had seen him. My heart pounded. Then he began to move again. It was only then that I noticed the boy wasn't walking backwards. His body was facing forward, but his head was twisted all the way around, staring straight at me. Every hair on my body stood on end. In that instant, I remembered what B had said, that she'd seen a boy behind me. I ran harder, gasping until I finally reached the top. When I dared to look back again, he was frozen, mid-step. Then slowly, he moved once more. After that, my memory is hazy. I somehow retrieved my things from school and ran home by the long way, avoiding the slope completely. That night I finally asked my father about the flowers. He said, "Oh, that? When I was a kid, I remember your grandmother and others were saying they suddenly appeared one day. No accident, no death. Nobody knew who was leaving them. Creepy, huh?" The next day I told B what I had seen. She asked to see my charm. When I pulled it out my bag, I was shocked. It had turned brown, as though it had been burned or stained. "That's probably because you saw the boy," B whispered. She showed me her own charm. It too had changed color, and inside, the contents were blackened. We still live our own lives normally now, but neither of us will go near that slope again. Sometimes we half joke, half fearfully say to each other, if we ever see that boy again, and if he ever catches up to us, that'll be the end. My mother tells me the flowers are no longer placed there, but I can't shake the memory of that boy, staring at me with his head twisted unnaturally, pausing and moving like something caught between his world and another. When I was very young, I had an experience where I nearly drowned. It's a memory from long ago, but it remains vivid in my mind even now, which shows how shocking it was. My family often went camping at the same place, a riverside site about 3 hours away by car. The water was clear, the mountains were close, and the scenery was beautiful. When we arrived, the four of us would pitch the tent. My father and mother would start preparing the meal while my older brother and I went down to the river to play. I was about 5 years old then. I had my float ring on, and my brother had gone off to play by himself. He was some distance away, and feeling brave, I decided to go further out. There were some deeper spots, but the current seemed gentle. I thought there was no danger. As I swam alone, I suddenly felt something against my leg. It was like something brushing or clinging to me, soft and slimy like seaweed. Even when I kicked it, it didn't come off. I tried to ignore it and keep playing, but the unpleasantness won out, and I decided to head back to shore. But that's when my legs started to feel heavier. I tried to grab whatever was on me and pull it off, but my foot wouldn't lift, and my hands couldn't reach. I tried swimming, but I couldn't move forward at all. Panic and fear rose up inside me. I decided to call for help. "Big brother, help me." I screamed loudly, over and over and over, but my brother, not far away at all, didn't even glance at me. My parents on the bank didn't react either. It was quiet all around us, so there was no reason at all they couldn't hear me. Then suddenly, something yanked my foot hard and pulled me under. In that instant, I saw what was clinging to my leg. It looked like a person, but its body was melted, dripping, almost formless. I could only tell it was human because of the part gripping me looked like a human hand. After that, my memory cuts out completely. Later, I was told by my family that I'd been pulled from the river and taken to the hospital in an ambulance. I was in an intensive care unit for 3 days, unconscious and causing my family terrible worry. When I told them what I remembered, the melted figure with the human hand, they didn't believe me at all. Ever since then, if we go camping, I don't play in the rivers anymore. And even now, whenever I hear stories of drowning, I picture that melted figure clinging to me, and I feel a deep chill run through my body. Ever since I can remember, I've been able to see ghosts. They're everywhere, really. If you're not paying close attention, it's hard to tell them apart from living people. The only difference is they don't interact with their surrounding. They don't speak with anyone, they don't physically touch anything. It's like the shape of a person made of air, standing there. Because of that, even though I could see them, I managed to live my life without too much trouble. At the middle school I attended, there was a rumor about a student who had fallen from a classroom window and died. I didn't know if it was true, but places with such stories often had ghosts. I was used to seeing them from elementary school, so I thought, well, I can handle this too. Sure enough, the first time I entered that classroom, there it was. I noticed the ghost right away, and as usual, I just casually looked at it. Then suddenly, the ghost's head turned sharply towards me, and our eyes met. It was looking at me. This had never happened before. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Worse still, it started walking towards me. I panicked. What should I do? Completely overwhelmed, I sank to the floor. A teacher and a few students helped me to the nurse's office, and I left school early. On the way home, I glanced back over my shoulder. There, by the second utility bowl behind me, stood the same ghost. It was following me. I ran all the way home, breath ragged, and slammed the door behind me. My mother saw me and asked what's wrong. But how could I explain it? That a ghost was trailing me? I'd never told anyone I could see them. Until now, I'd always believed ghosts were harmless, but now one was attached to me and I had no idea what to do. Thankfully, the ghost didn't appear in my house, but that night I hardly slept. In the morning, I came downstairs. My mother was cooking breakfast. I said, "Good morning," and she turned and looked at me and said, "Who are you?" I froze. Then, in the next moment, she smiled as if nothing had happened. "Oh, hey." She used my name. "Good morning." Could she see it too? There was no time to talk. I rushed through my morning routine and went to school. At school, the ghost was still there, drifting at the edge of my vision. It didn't do anything but stare, but even that was exhausting. I pretended not to see it. That evening when I got home, my mother was standing by the entrance. She looked at me again and said, "Who are you?" "It's me, I'm home." "I know, welcome back," she replied as if nothing was strange. That night after dinner, I asked my mother, "Do you see them too?" But she just looked puzzled. "See what? What are you talking about?" Still, something clicked in me. Maybe she couldn't say it outright, but maybe this was her way of teaching me something. From the next day on, every time the ghost met my eyes, I said quietly or thought to myself, "Who are you?" At first, it was terrifying to even look at it, but as I repeated this, my fear began to fade. Then one day, something changed. When I walked into the classroom, the ghost didn't look at me. It stayed put. It ignored me like all the other ghosts. My daily life returned to normal. Even now, as an adult, some ghosts still notice me. Each time I use the same method. "Who are you?" And they lose interest. I've never spoken with my mother about ghosts, but I'm convinced she can see them too. I think in her own way, she was quietly showing me how to handle them. This happened when I was in my early 20s. A friend of mine had just moved to a new house, so I went to bring a small housewarming gift. She told me she had rented an old second-hand house. My first impression, honestly, was, wow, this place is really old. My kids are small now, but once they get bigger, this place will feel cramped. By then, I want us to have our own home, she said. As she spoke, I couldn't help but notice she looked tired, even worn down, as if the move had already taken a toll on her. When I glanced out the window, I froze. From there, I could see a cemetery. The view alone made me uneasy, and my friend admitted she had hesitated for the same reason. But the rent was cheap, she said with a strained laugh. What bothered me more, though, was the noise. The neighborhood seemed quiet at first glance, but there was a constant, low-level bustle of voices, like a crowd somewhere close by. It was summer, so I assumed everyone in the area had their windows open, but still it was far too loud to ignore. I finally asked, "Isn't it noisy here? Don't you hear that?" "What? No, it's not noisy at all," she replied, looking puzzled. That answer unsettled me. The voices were so obvious, so constant, I could hardly believe she didn't hear them. I focused on where they seemed to be coming from, and my eyes fell on the cemetery. I forced myself to act normal for her sake, but inside I was deeply uneasy. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe some sort of gathering, maybe workers or visitors, but It didn't add up. It wasn't Obon season yet, and there shouldn't have been that many people there. The voices were countless. Men, women, old people, even the sound of a baby crying. Different tones and ages, but the words themselves were unclear, like overhearing half a conversation. At times they seemed like casual chatter, other times angry, then suddenly laughter or sobbing. It was a flood of sound, rising and falling all around me. My chest tightened. I couldn't bear it any longer. I cut my visit short and went home. That moment I left her neighborhood, the voices stopped. Only then did I realize my hands were trembling. The fear had gone deeper than I'd admitted to myself. For days afterward, I kept feeling as though the voices might return at any moment. I also couldn't stop thinking about my friend's face, so pale and worn, her energy drained. Could it be connected? But how could I bring it up? She seemed so glad to finally have a house, even if rented, and I didn't want to ruin that. And besides, I was the only one who heard the voices. What if she didn't believe me? Still, my worry gnawed at me. After a month, I finally gathered the courage to call her and tell her everything. To my surprise, she said quietly, "I knew it." She told me that she had noticed strange changes too. She was tired all the time. Everything felt like a burden. Her mood was dark, and worst of all, her newborn had been crying endlessly at night ever since they moved in. Eventually, she and her husband decided to move again. When I brought a second housewarming gift some months later, she greeted me with a bright smile I hadn't seen in a long time. Her new place was in a peaceful residential area, far from any graveyard. It made me think, sometimes cheap rent isn't worth the unseen price you might pay. A few years ago, I suddenly fell ill late at night. I was stuck in the bathroom, unable to leave because of nausea. By morning, I felt a little better, but with a slight fever lingering. I decided to take the day off work and go to the hospital. After having my blood drawn and examined, I thought I'd be given some medicine and sent home. Instead, the doctor frowned and said, "You'll need to be hospitalized." What? Hospitalized? I could hardly believe my ears. The diagnosis was Come on now. But my blood test showed such high inflammation markers that they insisted I be admitted right away. I protested. I didn't want to be hospitalized, but they wouldn't budge. And so I found myself facing my first ever hospital stay. Because the admission was so sudden, there weren't any regular beds available, so they placed me in a single room, a little further away from the main ward. "If you need anything, just call. We'll come right away," the cheerful nurse told me, and my life in the hospital began. But there was nothing to do. I wasn't even allowed to eat, I was only allowed the drips. I had brought nothing with me to kill time, so I decided to simply sleep as much as possible. One night I woke up and went to the bathroom. After finishing and washing my hands, I suddenly heard a voice behind me. "How are you feeling?" Startled, I turned. A thin man around 60 was standing there. Not too good. I can't eat anything," I answered awkwardly. He smiled brightly, almost pleased by my reply, and then walked out. Puzzled, I went back to my room and returned to sleep. I saw him again later in the hallway, always the same pattern. He would ask, "How are you feeling?" And when I answered, he would smile and leave without another word. If I tried to continue the conversation, he ignored me and walked away. It felt odd. Why ask at all if he didn't want to talk? On the third day, my IV was finally removed and I was given food. Watery rice gruel and thin miso soup without any ingredients. It was bland, but after days without eating, it tasted like a blessing. That night in the bathroom, I ran into him once again. "How are you feeling?" he asked once more. Annoyed by his one-sided routine, yet happy I could finally eat, I replied cheerfully. "Thanks to the treatment, I'm off the IV now. I can eat again and soon I'll be discharged." The man's expression changed instantly. His face fell, his smile vanished. He looked utterly disappointed. I was too taken aback to say anything. With slumped shoulders, he shuffled away. After that, he never approached me again. As I regained my strength, I began wandering the hospital for exercise. One day on another floor, I stepped aside as nurses pushed a stretcher past. "Time for a bath. Let's get you nice and clean," they were saying kindly. On the stretcher lay a patient, motionless. I glanced at his face and froze. It was the same man who had been asking me, "How are you feeling?" Heart pounding, I immediately went to the nurse's station. I knew I shouldn't pry, but I couldn't stop myself. "Excuse me, the patient just now, what's wrong with him?" "I'm sorry, but we can't share private information," one nurse replied politely. "I understand," I said quickly. "I'm a patient downstairs. That man used to speak to me in the hall, so I was curious. Sorry for asking." The atmosphere shifted. The nurses exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, one of them said, "Are you sure you're not mistaken? That patient has been bedridden for a long time, completely unconscious. If he could get up and walk, his family would cry with joy." I was stunned into silence. I've since been discharged and have lived healthily without major illness, but I still think about that man. Who or what was it that was asking me, night after night, "How are you feeling?" The image of his happy smile and then his look of crushing disappointment remains etched in my mind. My farthest family home was deep in the mountain, far from the nearest town where my grandparents lived. My grandfather worked as a stonemason. In the village, every gravestone and stone monument had been made by him. He was proud of his craft, and whenever we visited, he would take us on walks to show off the pieces he had created. One summer during middle school, I visited my grandparents again. In a detached shed beside the house, I noticed a newspaper laid on the floor, and on top of it sat a small Jizo statue I'd never seen before. I asked my grandmother about it. She explained it had come from a small shrine near the local chamber of commerce. With the aging of the village population, the statue had been left neglected. When someone went to check on it, its arm broke off. Seeing that, my grandfather got permission to bring it home for repairs. I had never actually seen my grandfather at work, so I became fascinated and spent my time hovering in his shed watching. He carefully wiped the Jizo with a dry cloth, treating even the broken fragments with care. Its left arm was already detached and lying on the floor. The right arm was cracked and looked like it could fall off at any moment. "I'll reinforce the right arm," he muttered. He began mixing something like an adhesive to apply, but as he lifted the statue there was a sharp crack, and the right arm broke off entirely. Seeing how badly it was damaged, he said it would need to be cemented, and he ended the work for the day. That night my grandfather started complaining about his right shoulder feeling stiff. He kept rolling it as if to ease discomfort. My grandmother said she'd never heard him complain of shoulder pain before. But the next day things worsened. He said his right arm felt strange and difficult to move. My father took him to the hospital where they ran tests, but found nothing abnormal. The symptoms progressed, and soon even his fingers felt numb, and he could hardly move them properly at all. They took him back to the hospital for further tests, including the possibility of a stroke, but again, nothing showed up. During this time, the Jizo had been forgotten, but a few days later, my grandfather said it's not right to leave the Jizo like that. So, under his instructions, my father and I completed the repairs ourselves. We reattached both arms securely and restored the statue to its original shape, then returned it to the shrine. That very night, my grandfather's right arm returned to normal, as if nothing had even happened. The numbness was gone, and he could move it freely. Our family was astonished. We began to talk about whether the strange illness had been caused by the Jizo's curse. Perhaps the Jizo had misunderstood my grandfather's good intentions and thought it was being harmed, but once repaired and returned, its anger subsided. Of course, it's only speculation, but there's no other explanation for my grandfather's sudden ailment and recovery. Since then, I felt an unease towards Jizo statues, a quiet fear I can't quite shake. In a certain town, there lived an elderly woman known as Kay, a pseudonym. She lived alone, and when she passed away she had no family, so she was buried as a Muan Botoke, an unclaimed soul, at the local temple. While alive, she was known throughout the neighborhood for her kindness. She would go out of her way to help others, and people spoke warmly of her even after her death. But as the saying goes, people's talk only lasts 75 days, and gradually her name stopped coming up. One day, 3 girls from the same middle school were studying together. They began reminiscing. One of them had lost their wallet on the way to school, and Kay had found it, traced her address from the contents, and returned it safely. If it weren't for Kay's grandma, I would have been in trouble, the girl said with a smile. At that moment, from nowhere, a trembling voice said, "Then help me too." The 3 froze. "Did you hear that? Who was that?" It said, "Help me, right?" They were panicking. The girl who had lost her wallet then whispered, "Could that be Kay's grandma?" Then 2 knocks at the door. They screamed and clung to each other. When they dared to open the door, no one was there. This incident spread as a rumor through the girls' parents. Soon, the story went that if you spoke aloud about how Kay's grandma had helped you, you would hear, "Then help me too," from nowhere. And if you called Kay's grandma, you'd get a knock at the door. What began as a strange story turned into something scary. People started to see Kay's once gentle name as linked to a ghostly presence. Among those hearing the rumor was H, a local police officer and father of one of those girls. Neighbors asked him to do something about it. He wasn't sure what he could do, but he began to look into Kay's life. Kay's cause of death was drowning, likely from losing consciousness in the bath. There was nothing suspicious. She had moved to an area relatively recently. Her parents and all her relatives had recently passed away, and there had been a son at some point, but nothing else was known. Her belongings had been stored at the police station. Among them were notebooks like diaries, meticulous recordings of each kindness she had done. The time, the place, the person, and even the outcome. Reading the pages, H wondered what she had truly felt. She had given so much kindness. Had she ever received kindness back? Scattered throughout the diary were the same phrase, "Someday, surely it will come back to me." But in the end she died alone, a traveler's death, buried as an unclaimed soul. Was her kindness ever repaid? And what did "help me too" mean? No one ever found out. The strange phenomenon gradually faded on its own, and after a while it stopped happening altogether. This happened when I was working part-time at a cake shop. As a sales clerk, I worked out front while about 7 chefs made cakes in the back all day. I was still learning everyone's faces and names, so during breaks I decided to chat with the staff to get to know them. But there was one person always working at the table near the entrance door, with whom I'd never had a chance to talk to. I figured eventually we'd have a break together, but no matter how long I worked there, I never once saw that chef during lunch. After a while I started to wonder when they even took breaks. One night after closing, we all cleaned up together. "Is everyone out? I'm locking the changing room." Someone called. We counted heads. Everyone was there, time to go home. But according to my mental tally, the chef who always worked by the door was missing. "Oh, wait a second, isn't that one person still in the back?" Everyone turned to me blankly. I tried to explain. "The woman with the hat pulled down low, always at the table by the door making cakes." But everyone said the same thing. There's no such person. I could have sworn she'd been there, right up till closing. Feeling unsettled, but not wanting to drag it out, I went home without another word. I'd always admired that chef. She never took breaks, always working so hard at her cake. And I had been looking forward to talking to her someday. But after that night, I never saw her at the table again. And that was when it finally dawned on me that maybe what I'd been seeing all along wasn't a living person. Time passed, and My last day at the cake shop arrived. I was working the register with the manager beside me. The store was getting busy. I glanced over towards the baked goods section and saw the manager's black uniform back. Oh, she's over there now, I thought, and kept serving customers. But at the same time, the manager was still right beside me. There were two managers. Startled, I caught the eye of the chef leader through the glass partition and signaled with my eyes, but he just smiled back at me as if nothing were odd. It seemed I was the only one seeing it. Since then, every so often I see people no one else can. Sometimes they look just like people who I know have passed away. I've never again seen two of the same people like with the manager, but I often realize only afterward that the person I'd been speaking to was probably not alive. I believe they're ghosts, but unlike living people, they never speak. If I try talk, they disappear, and if I tell someone else about them, they vanish as well. I've come to think ghosts are probably wandering everywhere, and it's a simple question of who can see them. After graduating high school, I left home. Years later, I returned back for the first time with my husband and children. Strange things had always happened in that house ever since I was newly built. I'd be paralyzed by sleep paralysis at night, pass unknown strangers in the hallway, and open sliding doors to find tatami rooms that shouldn't exist. It wasn't just me. My whole family had experienced such things often, and we talked about it daily. But that didn't mean we ever got used to it. Every evening, fear would settle as night came, a creeping sensation like something terrible drawing closer. Even though there were plenty of rooms, no one slept alone. My mother had to go with me, even to the bath or to the toilet. My father made us promise never to speak of it outside. He admitted later that he thought he knew the cause. A carpenter had told him about an old inn that was being demolished after a fire had ruined its reputation. My father bought the inn's wood cheaply and used it to build our house. No harm will come. You're only afraid because you think it's scary. That was my father's response whenever we complained. He lived there unfazed, and my mother eventually gave up on resisting. I, however, longed to grow up quickly, to leave that house behind forever. I knew when sleep paralysis was coming. First, my legs would grow heavy, then my stomach would tingle with a strange numbness. After that, my whole body would freeze. The only way to break free was to force out a voice, but usually only groans came. If someone else noticed and shook me, the paralysis would end immediately. On this return visit, for the first time in years, we all sat together. My parents, my husband, my 5-year-old son, my 3-year-old daughter, and me. As we ate, my son suddenly stopped, staring fixedly into the corner of the room. A chill ran through me. "What's in the corner?" I asked. "They're eating a much nicer feast over there," he said softly. "Don't look. Eat your dinner," I scolded quickly. The memory of the inn's old wood returned to me. Perhaps my son could see something, a scene from another time. Later, when we laid out the futons, my daughter began singing a song I'd never heard before. She hummed it quietly until she drifted off to sleep. Thankfully, nothing else happened. As always, morning light brought relief. Sometime afterward, my son suddenly said, "I want to go back to Grandma and Grandpa's house again." But we hadn't taken the children there since that night. "I want to play with H-kun and N-chan again." I froze. Those were names I'd never heard before. But in my memory, from when I was very young, I recalled playing with 2 children in the dark back room of the house. "They've moved away now," I told him gently. "But maybe someday you'll play again." I don't want to tell my children about the frightening things or the shadowy worlds that overlap with ours. Some things are better left unknown.